Hello everyone! We are about a month behind on our Bible study schedule. Please forgive me, I've been a little busy. Just want to say hello, welcome, and thank you for watching today's Bible study. It is going to be covering Genesis chapters 42 to 46. We are concluding the story of Joseph today. Where we left off last time, Joseph was given an Egyptian wife, and he was given two sons who he named Manasseh and Ephraim because they helped him to overcome the grief of losing his original family in Canaan. So now, with the famine that is currently raging, it's not just affecting Egypt, it is affecting Canaan, and Joseph's father and his brothers are at a loss of what to do. They're starving, they're running out of resources, so they are instructed by Jacob, their father, to go to the land of Egypt where he's heard they're selling grain and to acquire them some food to last through the famine. And Jacob refuses to allow Benjamin to go with them because of the tragedy and the trauma of losing Joseph. He's very protective over his youngest son, Benjamin, who is Joseph's full brother, Joseph's only full brother who shares both the same parents, Rachel and Jacob. When the sons approach Joseph, who is now advisor to Pharaoh and who is the most powerful person in Egypt apart from Pharaoh, and Joseph recognizes them immediately, but he allows them to believe that he's a stranger, to the point that he actually speaks in Egyptian to them through an interpreter, and he doesn't allow them to know that he speaks Hebrew. When he sees them, he accuses them of being spies. Joseph says, "You are spies, come to see how weak Egypt has become." And they try to explain their lineage, they try and explain that their father sent them, they're from Canaan. And of course Joseph already knows all this, but in trying to legitimize themselves, the brothers explain they have someone at home named Benjamin, their younger brother. Joseph says, "I'm going to imprison all of you, and I will allow one of you to go back and bring this Benjamin to me as proof that you're not lying and that you're not spies." So, in biblical fashion, of course, all of the brothers, so the 10 brothers, are imprisoned for 3 days, which is a very common time frame used throughout the Old and New Testament. They talk amongst themselves and they say, "We're being punished for what we've done to Joseph. This is God's wrath on us for having betrayed our brother." And Joseph heard them talking amongst themselves about him, and he could speak Hebrew, they didn't realize, and he actually went and hid his emotions from them, and the Bible says he went and concealed himself and cried. He gave them more than what they needed for the journey back, so he finally relented. He said, "Okay, only one of you will stay in prison while the rest of you can go and bring Benjamin back." So he gives them everything they need, and he returns them the payment that they had originally provided for the grain. Simeon is chosen to stay behind, and everyone else goes back to Jacob and explains the situation. They say, "The Pharaoh's advisor thought we were spies. We need to bring Benjamin to Egypt, or they will never release Simeon, and they will never feed us." Here's an interesting moment, because we know that Jacob favors Joseph and Benjamin. He never tries to hide that fact. He prefers them, he likes them more than all of his other sons. But at this moment I found it interesting, because Jacob starts to lament and mourn for the loss of Joseph, Simeon, and now potentially Benjamin. So he does mention Simeon by name. He says, "You've taken Joseph from me and my son Simeon." Even though Simeon's not his favorite, I like that Jacob is still saddened by losing him. Reuben, the oldest brother, who, if you remember from part 1, was thoroughly against betraying Joseph. He was the only one, actually, who defended Joseph. Reuben offers his son's very lives as insurance to Jacob to say, "I'll go and bring Benjamin to Egypt, but I promise you if I don't bring him home, you can kill my children." I don't think Jacob was going to go killing his grandsons, but it was an oath, right? "I bet you on my children's lives that I will bring Benjamin home to you." Jacob says, "No, I can't let you do that, because if anything happens to Benjamin, the grief will kill me. It will send this old man to his grave." When the grain finally ran out in Jacob's home in Canaan, he asked the brothers to go. Now, this is the interesting thing. It had to get to extenuating circumstances. We had to become desperate before Jacob allowed Benjamin to go. But finally he realizes they're going to starve if he doesn't. So Jacob packs them up with all kinds of gifts and resources from their hometown, fabrics, perfumes, whatever. Just things to kind of appease the Pharaoh's advisor. They all arrive back in Egypt. Joseph instructs all of the brothers to sit down and eat and have a feast, and they're all kind of confused, and they think that they're about to be confronted for stealing, because remember, their money was returned to them without any explanation. So they go to a servant and try to explain what happened and say, we tried to pay you guys, but for some reason the money was in our bags when we left. The servant says, don't worry, your God took care of it. It's interesting, when Joseph brings them in for this feast, just to give you an idea of the climate at the time. So Joseph was sitting by himself. His Egyptian servants sat at their own table. This is what blows my mind about Joseph being in a position of authority, because there's so much discrimination against the Jews that they won't even sit with them at a feast. Now his brothers are seated by age, and they're all kind of blown away. It's like Joseph is kind of showing them that he knows more than he's letting on. When he does finally meet his full brother Benjamin face to face, who has both of the same parents, Joseph is overcome with emotion. He has to go hide and cry on his own, and he has to wash his face, compose himself, come back. And I mentioned biblical numerology here again, is that during this feast, Joseph provides Benjamin with 5 times, it's very specific, it explains 5 times as much food as his brothers. The biblical meaning, allegedly, for the number 5 is grace. So here we have Benjamin sitting in Joseph's feast, being provided with grace. As everybody's eating, Joseph instructs his servant to place a silver cup in Benjamin's bag. When the brothers are leaving, he instructs another servant, go chase after them, they stole my silver cup. So the servant approaches them and says, our master says you've stolen from him. As punishment for this, whoever has the cup is going to be enslaved forever. They all say, we don't have it. You go ahead and enslave whoever has it because it won't be one of us. Sure enough, they go through cutting the bags, and Benjamin has the silver cup. Now, something very interesting happens here. All of Benjamin's brothers, all 10 of his older brothers, are lamenting. They start tearing their clothes in grief. And this is actually an ancient Jewish tradition called Kriya. I'll put it on the screen so you can read it. I could be pronouncing it wrong. But Kriya means to express grief and anger at losing a loved one. So not only are they grieving, but they're angry at the loss. After they are confronted, the brothers go to Joseph and beg. They beg for him to have mercy on Benjamin. And he looks at them and he says, don't you know that I can predict the future? Maybe to Joseph's astonishment, his brothers have been through such a transformation of heart that every single one of them, even Judah, offers to take Benjamin's place as slave. So every brother is saying, don't take Benjamin, let him go home. Because they all know losing Benjamin for their father will be so horrible, it will kill him. There's a verse that I want to highlight here. It's chapter 44, verse 18. Judah says, be not angry with me, to Joseph. Judah implores Joseph, be not angry with me, even though you are as powerful as Pharaoh. So here we have written documentation that Joseph is indeed as powerful as Pharaoh, which again blows my mind because he's Jewish in Egypt. Judah is trying to appeal to Joseph's better nature. He's explaining, our dad is so in love with this young boy, please don't allow our father to experience that loss. He says that our father's life is bound up in the boy's life. That's verse 30. And that is a beautiful way to put it. Finally, Joseph is hearing all of his brothers begging for Benjamin's life, and he finally breaks down in front of them after all of his attendants and Egyptian people leave the room. When it's just him and his brothers, he starts crying. He starts speaking Hebrew to them, and he reveals that he is in fact their brother. Now, in chapter 45, verse 5, but don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. And that reminded me of something that Jesus said quite a while later. Because like I mentioned in another part of this Bible study, Joseph is a Christ figure, so he's a symbol of Christ to come. And it's highlighted here because in John, now we're in New Testament, John 14 verse 3, Jesus says, And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. Here we see that Joseph is recognizing there was a bigger plot. God allowed him to go through suffering so that he would someday be able to deliver his family from starving to death in Canaan. Because if Joseph had never been sent to Egypt, Egypt never would have been able to predict the famine. They never would have been able to plan ahead the way that they did and spare their people from starvation, spare the communities on the outskirts of Egypt as well, because these communities were coming in to purchase grain from them. So that wouldn't have happened, and Jacob's whole family would be dead. The lineage would be over. Israel's no more. Joseph, who time and time again has proven to have the humility to recognize that God's ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts. Sometimes God will put you in a position that seems almost unfair. I mean, think about it. Joseph's was 100% unfair. And I think a lot of Christians, even, if put in that scenario, would be shaking their fist at the sky and saying, why are you letting this happen to me? I've been a good and faithful servant. I've been tithing. I've been praying. And here I am in this place of suffering. How dare you? We are prideful. I, at least, am prideful enough at times in my life to look at God and say, how dare you? But we don't have the same humility that Joseph had when we do that, to recognize, I don't understand why I'm being put in this circumstance, but I am having faith that the reason for my circumstance will be made clear to me and that it will be worth it. God never wastes your pain. Joseph tells his brothers to bring Jacob to Goshen, and he wept from joy, and he spoke with all of his brothers freely, and they spoke with him freely. And to me, that just means that they started catching up, that all that resentment washed away, all of the old hurts, the old jealousies, all of that stuff that they were getting caught up on before has disappeared, and they're speaking freely one with another. Pharaoh and his officials are also delighted to hear that Joseph's family is coming. I'm sure Pharaoh's thinking, well, if Jacob was able to raise a man like Joseph, I'm sure his brothers are going to be really helpful. And he requests that his brothers, since they're a shepherding family, and the Egyptians actually hated shepherds, so that's why they were being put in their own little community, Goshen, to keep them kind of away from the discriminatory Egyptians. But Pharaoh even requests that they help him with his livestock, his personal livestock, so that's interesting. Now here again, we have biblical numerology of Benjamin is given 5 changes of clothes. So the Bible doesn't do things by accident here. He was given 5 times as much food. Now he's being given 5 changes of clothes and 300 pieces of silver. So here we have that grace number coming back into it. When Jacob is informed of what's happening, I'm sure he's slightly overwhelmed. He's overjoyed that his son is alive. But God speaks to Jacob. Now you have to remember Jacob's history with God. Jacob met God face to face when he wrestled with him. Now some people say that was an angel. I personally believe that that was God incarnate wrestling with Jacob. The term Israel actually means to wrestle with God. And it's something we do through prayer now. We wrestle with him, we reason with him, we argue with him when we say, please give me this blessing. Because Jacob's whole thing with wrestling with God was just to get a blessing. It wasn't some enlightened reason. He wasn't trying to achieve nirvana. He was simply asking God to bless him. So now this same God who he wrestled with years before comes to him in a vision. And Jacob says, here I am. And the Lord says, I'm here to comfort you about Egypt. He basically provides him with a timeline of what's going to happen. You're going to go live in Egypt, and you are going to die. And he says, but don't fret, because I think for a small Hebrew shepherding family, the idea of dying in a foreign land was probably a little bit saddening. But the Lord comforts him. He said, you're going to die in Goshen, but Joseph will be there to cover your eyes, so don't fret. And that's how beautiful the Lord is. He's so comforting, and he's so fatherly that he saw that Jacob was stressing about this thing, and he came to him individually and said, don't worry, it's gonna be okay. So the whole family, all of the sons, all of the wives, all of the grandchildren, all make their way down to Egypt. Joseph embraces Jacob when they meet again, and he is overcome with emotion to the point that he has to cry. They hold each other, and Joseph and Jacob have a beautiful reunion. Jacob actually meets Pharaoh, he blesses Pharaoh, and before Jacob dies, he blesses all 12 of his sons. So it kind of brings resolution to all that favoritism. I mean, some of the blessings aren't as positive as others. You can read them. They are in chapter 47, I believe. Jacob sort of compensates for the favoritism that was happening throughout his life with his children. He blesses all 12 of his sons, and he is reunited with them before he dies. And he does die there, but Joseph buries him in the land of his fathers. And again, this story is a full-on illustration of all things work together for good for those who love the Lord, because wow, from where we started to where we ended, huge transformation. God worked it out. There's no other way that this could have happened without God's hand in the situation. There's two things that I think I really would like people to take away from this Bible study. The first thing is that remember, no matter what circumstance you're in, God has a bigger plan. God's working things out that you can't see. So trust him, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard to trust him. The second thing is, just like Joseph went ahead to make a place for his family, to save them from the famine, Jesus went ahead and made a plan and a place for you to save you from yourself, to save you from the consequence of your sin. Jesus has gone ahead. He suffered for us so that we can be made whole. So, in closing, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to send me a message. There's probably a lot that I didn't cover. I just want you to know, that you know that you know. It is a fact. I love you. Jesus loves you. And I hope you have a wonderful however long it is till I make another video. Bye-bye!